She was ignored by everyone, until a 4-star general walked in and saluted her. They called her the ghost of the hallway. No one said it out loud, of course. It was in the way they looked through her, never at her. In the way they walked by, brushing past her mop handle like it was part of the wall. In the way their boots clicked against the linoleum with precision and rank, while her scuffed soles made no sound at all. Angela Torres had become something the military never officially trained anyone to be: invisible. She moved with quiet rhythm through the cold, gray hallways of the base, always early, always alone. Her green coveralls hung loose on her frame, spotted with bleach and wear, like the skin of someone who had spent years trying to scrub something clean that wouldn't wash away. Her hands were strong, too strong for someone in her position, but no one noticed that. Just like no one noticed her eyes, sharp with memory, or her posture, which carried the kind of discipline that doesn't come from mopping floors. Every morning began before the sun did. The base was silent, save for the sound of Angela unlocking the janitor's closet, her own kind of armory. Cleaning agents, mop buckets, rolls of paper towels lined up like supplies in formation. She loaded her cart with the same precision she once used to prep engine bays. Each item had its place. Everything neat. Efficient. Functional. No wasted movement. By the time the barracks stirred with life, Angela had already swept the walkways, wiped down the sinks, and refilled the soap dispensers. Her work was as invisible as she was, meant to disappear the moment it was done. Soldiers rushed past her in a blur of urgency. Officers nodded to each other with crisp acknowledgement. Names were called out. Commands issued. Angela simply pushed her cart from one end of the building to the next, unnoticed. Somewhere, years ago, her name had meant something. But here, now, she was just the janitor. Somewhere, years ago, her name had meant something. But here, now, she was just the janitor. She would sometimes catch pieces of conversations as she passed rooms, young recruits talking about drills, promotions, complaints about mess hall food. Occasionally, someone cracked a joke about the cleaning lady, never realizing she was just a few feet away. Never realizing she understood every acronym, every protocol, every hesitation in their voices. Never realizing she had once stood where they stood, maybe higher. They didn't see her. Not really. One particularly cold morning in February, Angela was scrubbing the floor outside the supply room when a group of second lieutenants passed by. One of them nearly tripped over her mop bucket, muttering, "Damn janitors, always in the way," before chuckling with his friends. Angela didn't flinch. Didn't respond. She just dipped the mop back into the water and kept working. It wasn't the first time. Wouldn't be the last. You might think this would break a person. Being forgotten. Dismissed. Flattened into a background figure on the same grounds where you once commanded respect. But Angela had learned long ago how to carry dignity quietly. She didn't seek approval. She didn't need recognition to validate her purpose. She worked like it mattered, even if it didn't to them. But what no one bothered to ask was this: why would a woman in her late 50s, with hands like a mechanic and a spine like a soldier, be working here, as a janitor, in a military base? The truth was, Angela had tried to leave this life behind once. When she retired from the Air Force, she thought it was a transition. That there would be gratitude. Opportunities. That her 22 years of service would open doors. But the medals gathered dust in a shoebox. The recommendations went unread. And the world, as it often does, moved on without her. Civilian life was not kind. She applied for dozens of jobs, maintenance roles, technical assistant, even instructor positions at local trade schools. But her age worked against her. Employers wanted youth. Experience, it turned out, didn't matter unless it came with the right connections. She had none. With bills piling up and no family to fall back on, she did what she had to do. She came back. The base offered her a civilian custodial position. No rank. No respect. No salute. But it was work. It was a roof. And it was, in some strange way, home. She knew these halls. Knew the sounds, the smells, the rhythm of military life. Even if now she moved like a shadow within it. She kept to herself. Not because she was shy, but because the silence had become her armor. Every once in a while, a young soldier would hold a door open for her, or nod in vague acknowledgement. Those small moments lit sparks inside her that she quickly buried. It was easier that way. There were nights she sat alone in her small on-base housing unit, fingers stiff from chemicals, back aching from hours bent over sinks and floors. She'd take out the old photo album, the one she never showed anyone. Pictures of her standing in desert heat beside the aircraft she helped bring back to life. Photos of her younger self, hair tied back, grease on her cheeks, a smile that belonged to someone who felt seen. In those moments, the contrast between then and now was too sharp to hold for long. So she'd put the album away. Wake up before the sun. And do it all over again. One morning, as she cleaned the stairwell, she overheard two captains discussing an upcoming base inspection. A 4-star general was scheduled to visit in a few days. The base was buzzing with anticipation. Rooms were being repainted. Signs replaced. Training exercises rehearsed. Angela didn't care. She'd seen countless generals come and go. None of them ever saw her. But the irony wasn't lost on her, how the entire base would scramble to impress a man whose boots wouldn't even touch most of the places she cleaned every day. No one would think to prepare the janitor's closet. No one ever did. Still, she polished the doorknobs. She scrubbed the floors with extra care. Not for the general, but for herself. Because she had always believed that even invisible work deserved excellence. That day, she passed by a bulletin board where new recruits had pinned up photos, notes, and thank you cards to their mentors, instructors, field commanders. Angela paused. Her name wasn't there. It never had been. And that's when the truth settled in her chest, heavier than any burden she carried. You can give your life to something, and still be forgotten. But Angela Torres did not live her life for applause. She lived it for purpose. And in the quiet hours before dawn, when no one watched and no one clapped, she continued to serve. Just as she always had. Long before the mop and bucket, Angela Torres wore a different uniform, crisp, pressed fatigues with grease beneath the cuffs and strength in her stride. Back then, her hands weren't calloused from janitorial chemicals but from torque wrenches and engine housings. She didn't push a cart filled with cleaning supplies, she rolled toolboxes across runways where the roar of fighter jets shook the very bones of the earth. Before the silence found her, there had been noise, loud, relentless, purposeful noise. Angela joined the U.S. Air Force at 24. She wasn't fresh out of school, nor driven by dreams of medals or fame. She joined because structure made sense. Because engines spoke a language she understood when people did not. And because she had grown up with the kind of life that made you crave control. She wasn't the fastest, or the strongest, or the loudest in her class. But she was relentless. If she didn't know something, she stayed up learning it. If she got it wrong, she fixed it without complaint. Her instructors noticed. Slowly, her reputation grew, not for being brilliant, but for being dependable. Precise. The kind of airman you wanted with you when things went sideways. By the time she reached her 10th year, Angela had become a certified master mechanic, specializing in aircraft propulsion systems. She was stationed in Europe, then the Middle East, working long rotations in some of the most volatile regions the military had a presence in. She rebuilt engines in sandstorms. Diagnosed turbine faults by ear. Woke up to the sound of mortars and went to bed after 15-hour shifts on the tarmac. She never bragged. Never posted pictures. But those who served with her remembered. Especially the young airmen she trained, nervous, uncertain kids who had never held a torque gun before she handed them one. She was tough on them. Demanding. But always fair. She taught them not just to fix the machine, but to respect it. To understand that a single missed bolt or misread pressure valve could cost lives. One of those airmen, years ago in Kuwait, had been a clumsy young lieutenant named Anthony Griggs. He didn't know the difference between a compressor and a combustion chamber when he first arrived. He'd drop tools, forget torque specs, second-guess every decision. Angela had no time for hand-holding, but something in the kid's earnestness kept her from writing him off. She stayed after hours. Drew diagrams. Let him make mistakes, then made sure he learned from them. "You don't have to be the best," she told him once. "You just have to care more than the guy who doesn't." Griggs had listened. Absorbed everything. And eventually, under her guidance, he became competent. Confident. Respected. But that was a lifetime ago. Angela didn't think about him now, not really. Not consciously. Just another name in a long line of students, peers, soldiers. People moved on. Careers flourished. She stayed. By her 19th year, the wear began to show. Old knee injuries. Constant back pain. But she kept going. Every aircraft that flew safely was another mission accomplished. Another unseen victory. Then, in her 22nd year, the end came, quietly. There was no dramatic send-off, no parade, no speech. A folded flag. A few handshakes. A final signature on a discharge form. She packed up her things, shipped home the box of awards she never displayed, and stepped off the base for what she thought would be the last time. At first, retirement felt like floating. She woke up late. Tried cooking again. Watched TV shows she'd missed while deployed. But after the first month, the silence grew louder than the engine bays she used to work in. The days felt too long. Too empty. No orders. No camaraderie. No purpose. She applied for jobs in aircraft maintenance, civilian firms, airports, even training centers, but found closed doors. Her resume was strong, but her age and military background made her overqualified to some, not the right fit to others. Some just never replied. Her savings dwindled. Rent rose. There was no family to call, no siblings, no kids. The only place that had ever made sense was the base. So she went back. Not through the front gates as Staff Sergeant Torres, but through the side entrance as Angela the janitor. She signed the civilian onboarding forms without comment. Took the schedule. Accepted the uniform. And began cleaning the very spaces she once worked in. No one knew who she had been. She didn't offer it. Why would she? People only see what they want to see. The mop became her new tool. The supply closet, her new office. But her spine stayed straight, and her movements stayed precise. Because even though the work had changed, the way she approached it had not. She was still serving. In her own way. She would sometimes glance at the planes taking off in the distance as she emptied trash cans by the runway side dorms. She wondered if they still flew the models she used to fix. Wondered if anyone checking their flight systems had learned from someone like her. But those moments were brief. She didn't allow herself to linger in the past. The world didn't stop for ghosts. The only ones who remembered her now were the walls, and even they were being repainted. The truth was, Angela had come to terms with being forgotten. Not bitterly. Just, honestly. People forget things. That's life. You give it your all, and then you step aside so the next in line can rise. She didn't need to be celebrated. She just needed to keep moving forward. What she didn't know, what no one around her knew, was that something was about to happen. Something that would peel back time like paint from old steel. Something that would force the entire base to stop, and finally look at the woman they'd walked past 1,000 times. But for now, Angela pushed her cart down another hallway, silent and steady. Not knowing that one of her former students had returned, no longer a clumsy lieutenant, but a general. And he hadn't forgotten her. Not even a little. The base was buzzing in a way it hadn't in years. It started with whispers, a high-level inspection. Then came the memos. Then the panic. Uniforms had to be perfect. Barracks spotless. Schedules restructured. The officers began rehearsing conversations the way soldiers rehearse drills. Floors were buffed. Windows wiped. Flags starched and hung without a wrinkle. A 4-star general was coming. Commander Anthony Griggs. Angela heard his name like everyone else did, through overheard fragments, clipped orders, stressed voices. It didn't mean much to her at first. She had cleaned through dozens of inspections, including one led by a Secretary of Defense. These things came and went. Big names arrived in black vehicles, shook hands, gave speeches, and left before the dust settled. She didn't expect this one to be any different. That morning, like every morning, she arrived before dawn. The base was still asleep when she keyed open the janitor's closet, tied her coveralls tight, and started her rounds. The air was unusually tense. People were moving fast, voices tight with urgency. She passed a young corporal ironing his shirt sleeve against a wall outlet. Another soldier was spit-shining his boots in the hallway, muttering curses under his breath. Angela kept moving. By mid-morning, she was assigned to clean the corridor near the general's temporary office, a polished, rarely used wing of the operations building that had suddenly sprung to life. She mopped the tiled floors with slow, steady strokes, keeping the bucket close, staying out of the way. It was muscle memory by now. She didn't need to think about it. She didn't notice the silence at first. It crept in softly, voices lowering, footsteps slowing. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from absence, but from presence. Something, someone, was approaching. Angela dipped her mop again, wrung it out, and looked up. And saw a line of sharply dressed officers in formation. Brass buttons. Immaculate hats. Rigid backs. At the center of it all, walking with a calm confidence, was a man with 4 stars on his collar. Commander Anthony Griggs. He looked older than the name she remembered. Tall, composed, silver in his hair, a briefcase in his hand. His presence was heavy, not from arrogance, but from command earned over decades. Angela lowered her gaze slightly, out of habit. The same way one avoids locking eyes with high rank. She stepped an inch to the side, mop still in hand, waiting for him to pass. But he didn't. The general's stride slowed. Then stopped. Dead in the middle of the hallway. The officers behind him halted like dominoes. Confusion flickered across their faces. Angela didn't move. Her fingers tightened around the mop handle, not out of fear, but instinct. What was happening? He was staring at her. Not through her. At her. Then he took a step closer. Angela glanced up, cautious but curious. His eyes were sharp, scanning her face not with judgment, but with recognition. Familiarity. A memory uncoiling across decades. And then, the words came. Sergeant Torres, he said quietly, but clearly. His voice was firm. Intentional. Angela blinked. The mop handle felt heavier in her grip. She hadn't heard that name, that title, in over 10 years. The hallway went still. You could hear the faint hum of fluorescent lights above, the distant echo of boots on concrete. But in this corridor, time had paused. I remember you, he said. Gasps slipped from a few of the officers behind him. You could feel the collective confusion ripple through them, like watching a strict professor call the janitor a war hero. Angela didn't respond. Not immediately. Her mind was racing. The name Griggs hadn't meant anything to her this morning. But now, looking at him, the pieces began to fall into place. Kuwait. 2003, a young, uncertain lieutenant with a sharp mind and clumsy hands. Always asking questions. Always staying late after training sessions. I was the idiot who mixed up turbine oil weights during repairs, he added, a faint smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Angela exhaled a soft, surprised breath. Her jaw trembled just slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of being remembered. You trained me, he said. And I've never forgotten you. She looked at him, her eyes suddenly fuller than they had been in years. Not with tears, but with something deeper. Affirmation. Vindication. Quiet pride, long buried and now unearthed by 4 stars and a memory. Then, without hesitation, General Griggs straightened his back, brought his hand to his brow, and delivered a crisp, formal salute. Not as a gesture of courtesy, but of respect. A 4-star general saluted the janitor. Silence fell again, but this time, it was a different kind. Heavy with realization. Eyes widened. Spine stiffened. Officers looked around at each other, wondering how they could have passed this woman for years and never known. Angela didn't move. For the first time in a decade, she stood as she once did on the flight line, head high, shoulders square, hands steady. She didn't return the salute, not out of disrespect, but because she didn't need to. That moment wasn't about protocol. It was about memory. About honor, returned. Behind the general, a young lieutenant whispered, "She used to be Airforce." Another whispered back, "No. She is Airforce." Angela's name, which hadn't been spoken aloud in that hallway for over 10 years, now echoed softly from one corner to another. She wasn't invisible anymore. She never had been. People just hadn't looked hard enough. And now, they couldn't look away. The sound of that salute still hung in the air, long after the general lowered his hand. Angela Torres stood frozen, not from fear, not even from shock, but from the strange stillness that comes when the world suddenly sees you. After years of walking through those hallways like a shadow, it was as if someone had turned the lights on and everything she had ever done now stood fully illuminated in front of the people who had once ignored her. No one knew what to say. For a moment, the corridor felt too narrow for everything it was holding: embarrassment, awe, silence, and a sense of collective guilt. The young officers, the administrative aides, the ranking commanders who had walked by her every day now looked at her with new eyes. They noticed the way she stood, not timidly, but with the quiet bearing of someone who'd long ago earned her place. Her boots were scuffed, yes, and her coveralls were stained with years of service not acknowledged in ribbons or plaques, but in that moment, she was no less a soldier than the general before her. The general spoke again, softer now. "I just wanted to say thank you. You were one of the first to believe in me." Angela's throat tightened, but she didn't let the emotion show. She gave a subtle nod. The kind of nod that says more than any speech ever could. The general stepped back, turned toward the others, and continued down the hallway. But the spell had been broken. Or perhaps, it had just begun. The rest of the corridor didn't move right away. Some exchanged stunned glances. Others simply stared at Angela, as if seeing her for the very first time. A young lieutenant stepped forward awkwardly, clearing his throat. "Ma'am, I didn't know you served." Angela looked at him, not with scorn, but with something closer to grace. She gave a small shrug. "No reason you would've," she replied. Her voice was low and even, but it landed like a stone dropped in water, rippling outward. She turned back to her cart, but the air had changed. The silence that followed her down the hallway was no longer the silence of being ignored, it was the silence of respect. Of awareness. That afternoon, whispers moved faster than official orders. By the time lunch rolled around, Angela's name had made its way into the officers' mess. Someone had pulled up her service record. Someone else found an old group photo from Kuwait, and there she was, standing in a row of mechanics, grease on her face, uniform sharp, eyes fierce. The caption underneath listed her as Staff Sergeant Angela Torres. "I walked by her yesterday," someone said in the break room, "and didn't even look at her twice." "She taught turbine systems?" another asked. "No way." 22 years, someone else confirmed. "Overseas deployments, instructor-level training, 2 commendations. We've had a legend cleaning our floors." Angela, unaware of the storm she'd set off, continued her shift as always, sweeping hallways, wiping surfaces, refilling supplies. But something had shifted. People greeted her now. Some stood when she entered a room. More than one soldier offered to carry her supplies. She waved them off gently, politely, but their offers weren't empty anymore. They weren't awkward pity or forced courtesy. They came from recognition. That evening, as she headed toward the maintenance wing to clock out, she passed by the same bulletin board she'd looked at weeks earlier, the one with pinned-up notes and photos and thank yous. This time, a new note had been tacked to the top. "To Staff Sergeant Torres, thank you for your service, and for never needing anyone to notice in order to serve with pride. Lieutenant Henderson, your mop bucket almost tripped me once. I'm sorry." Angela didn't laugh. But a smile broke at the corner of her mouth, slow and unpracticed. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The next day, she found someone had quietly cleaned out and repainted the janitor's closet. A small chair had been added inside. A framed copy of her old service photo hung next to the cleaning supplies. On the door, someone had taped a small printed nameplate. Angela Torres, Veteran Maintenance Specialist. She touched it once, gently. Then unlocked the door, as she always did, and got to work. But now, people said, "Good morning." Now, doors were held open. Now, the eyes that passed her didn't look above her or through her, but at her. And in those glances, that nod, that simple nameplate, there was something even more powerful than a salute. It was remembrance. It was dignity returned. It was proof that even if the world forgets, the truth waits for its moment. And when that moment comes, it doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to stand still, raise its hand, and salute. People kept talking about it for days. Some called it a moment of reckoning. Others described it as the hallway salute that changed everything. Angela didn't call it anything. She just kept showing up, same uniform, same cart, same quiet dignity. But the base didn't see her the same anymore. Not after that day. Respect had returned, not loud or ceremonial, but steady, intentional. One by one, people began asking her name. Offering coffee. Requesting stories, sometimes with hesitation, as if they weren't sure they deserved to hear them. She didn't open up much. She never needed to be the center of anything. But every now and then, she'd nod, sit, and share a fragment of her past, an airfield in Afghanistan, a training session in Germany, a near miss that ended in a safe landing because she'd double-checked the fuel lines herself. It was never about the glory. Angela had lived her life in service, not for applause but for purpose. She fixed machines so others could fly. She trained people so they wouldn't fail where it mattered most. She kept systems running, quietly, effectively. Even now, as a janitor, she served the mission. Because to her, it was never about what role she played. It was about how she played it. One afternoon, weeks after the general's visit, a young recruit named Ellis caught up with her near the barracks stairwell. He looked nervous, barely out of high school, full of questions but not sure if he was allowed to ask them. "Ma'am," he said. Angela turned, leaning on the handle of her mop. "Is it true you used to teach turbine systems?" he asked. She nodded once. "That's right." His eyes widened. Would you ever show me something sometime? I just started tech training, and I want to get good. Like, actually good. Angela looked at him, really looked. He reminded her of dozens of others. Bright-eyed, unsure, looking for something solid to hold on to. "Bring your manuals tomorrow," she said, with a small smile. "You learn better when your hands are dirty." The boy grinned like he'd just been knighted. "Yes, ma'am." And just like that, a cycle began again. Not in a classroom. Not in a hangar. But right here, in the quiet corners of the base where service and ego no longer walked side by side. Where wisdom passed not through rank, but through lived experience. Angela never asked for her story to be known. But something about that day, when the general stopped, remembered her, and saluted in full view of everyone, broke open a truth that had long gone unseen: the value of a person isn't tied to the title they carry, or the uniform they wear, or whether the world is paying attention. It lives in the things they've built when no one was watching. It breathes in the people they've helped rise. It echoes in the lives they've shaped, quietly, persistently, without demand or applause. The general came and went. His visit was documented, logged, filed. But his salute? That stayed. Not because it was grand, but because it was real. So why am I telling you this story? Because every day, we pass people like Angela Torres. We brush past them in silence. We fail to ask their names. We assume we know their worth based on a job title, a uniform, a silence they've learned to carry. We forget that history walks among us, pushing carts, sweeping floors, picking up after the noise we leave behind. But every single one of them has a story. Not all will end with a salute. Not all will be recognized. But every story deserves to be remembered. Especially the quiet ones. Especially the ones like hers. Because sometimes the greatest heroes don't stand at the front of the formation, they stand alone in the hallway, mop in hand, back straight, head high, still serving.